All right, and welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you with us. You're joining International Research Partnerships, Elements of Success, and we are recording today's session. I'm Carly Searcy. I'm project manager for ICU-DDR. ICU-DDR is the International Consortium of Universities for Drug Demand Reduction, and it is my pleasure to be with you today. I've pasted some information in the chat box to invite you to connect with ICU-DDR via our website, our mailing list, our YouTube channel, and our university membership. We are fortunate to have two speakers with us today, both experienced in international research collaboration, working with partners in a variety of countries. I'll introduce them both now. Our first speaker today, Dr. Susana Henriques. She holds a PhD in sociology. She is assistant professor with habilitation at Portuguese Open University, Department of Education and Distance Learning. She's also a researcher at the Center for Research and Studies in Sociology. Susana's fields of specialization include issues of network digital education, health literacy, and digital literacy, and research methodologies. Our second speaker today is Dr. Roger Peters. He's an emeritus professor in the Department of Mental Health Law and Policy at the University of South Florida and holds a joint appointment in USF's College of Public Health. He currently serves as a consultant to the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, and also the Colombo Plan. And he's a consultant to the Organization of American States Inter-American Drug Abuse Commission. During Dr. Peters' 35 years on the faculty, he served as both associate chair and chair of his department. He received his PhD in clinical psychology from the Florida State University, and he's a licensed psychologist in the state of Florida. Dr. Peters is our vice president of our board for ICU-DDR. He also serves on the Florida Supreme Court Steering Committee on Problem-Solving Courts and has been a faculty member of the National Judicial College since 2014. He's served as a consultant to UNODC and the World Health Organization in developing guidelines on treatment alternatives to conviction or punishment. And he's a member of the Treatment Expert Advisory Group for the Colombo Plan. Dr. Peters serves on the editorial boards for several journals. And he has also served as chair and co-editor of the SAMHSA Treatment Improvement Protocol number 44, and that's on substance abuse treatment for adults in the criminal justice system. I'm grateful to have both of you with us today. Dr. Henriques, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Carly. Welcome to all of you. I'm going to share my screen and start my presentation. Well, I took this the theme of this webinar, which is International Research Partnerships, Elements of Success, and I add and obstacles to overcome, because this is my proposal for our talk today. I organized my presentation following the questions that were addressed by this webinar. But first of all, and for starters, I have two previous questions for you to answer. So please open your microphone and just tell me, what's the worst color that was ever invented? Anyone? Don't be afraid to speak with me. You are safe. You are safe in that side of the screen. I'm not dangerous.
Well, I'll go with purple.
Okay, thank you, Carly. What was the color? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Purple.
Purple, okay.
I'm hoping someone will argue with me.
Any other contribution? Okay, I will pass to the next one, which is, what is one ability that you believe everybody should possess? Maybe in the chat. We follow you, yes, but I need you to answer me. One ability that you believe everybody should possess. Okay, black is another color, okay. And for the second question? maybe the ability to, okay, read is another, communication, right. That's great answers, thank you. So my point is, none of these answers are right or wrong. My point is, we all have different opinions, liking and affections, perceptions and experiences, and we are all different and unique. I know this is obvious for all of us. Nonetheless, it is important to keep in mind when hearing my presentation that this that I'm going to present, it's my experience. It's not the right experience, not the wrong experience, just the experiences, minds that I've been able to build throughout my pathway. And so this is a previous declaration of interest, if I may say so, that my presentation is based on my experience. That being said, I will start with this first question that was addressed: how to meaningfully pursue original research across national borders? Well, we never have the ideal conditions. We have a lack of time, we have scarce or no funding, so we must be creative and work with what is available. For that, you must be persistent. Do not give up when facing difficulties. Try again, do it in a different ways, and following different paths in order to achieve what are your goals. Be open-minded and flexible. Sometimes our expectations don't exactly match the reality. Be open to the difference, be flexible, be resistant. Be like a tree that moves with strong wind, but is that move that avoids the tree to be broken. Develop a truly collaborative attitude. When you share, you also learn. That's why I like to start my presentations with questions, because I begin learning. I expect to begin learning already. And those are important skills for networking development. And I choose the word development intentionally, as it doesn't appear spontaneously. We must build the network and work on it to improve its development. The second question is, how can addition science researchers meaningfully pursue original research across national borders? And about this, I have some tips. You and your work, is the first one, must have some visibility. So present your work in scientific seminars, in webinars, wherever, when you have the opportunity to have it discussed with peers. Again, when you share, you learn also. Get your work published is another opportunity to get visible and to also learn with the contributions of reviewers, for example. And then communication. As you said, communication is a very important skill. Science communication is about your relation with a diverse audience and is also about advocacy. Communication is a key and a critical factor and must have some characteristics. It must be brief, make short, direct and effective messages. It must be visual, use infographics, images, colors, figures. It must be formative, explain the main concepts, allowing the correct understanding of the message, and at the same time avoid the scientific specific terms, the scientific slang. Globalize, select the information that has a wide interest in highlighting how your work contributes to that audience or to that community or to that problem. Keep it simple, present the results, identify the objectives and explain who must be interested and why. Use diverse media, take advantage of social media, for example, Twitter. So these are some characteristics. The other issue is how can international collaborations expand your current understanding of addiction? And for this one, my suggestion is complexity. The positivist and deterministic paradigm is suitable for explaining static systems in balance. But when it comes to explaining unpredictable and uncertain systems, such as living systems, it reveals an almost total inability to explain and to understand them. That is the contribution of the complexity theory. The world is an unseparable whole, and addictions is a complex phenomenon. That means the interactions between its elements are so many that it is not possible to understand the phenomenon through simple descriptions of these parts. The complexity lies in the fact that the components of the systems interact, and through this interaction, they change the system and they change themselves, creating unpredictable scenarios, chaos, and unknowables. Facing these, we as researchers must work together in collaboration, in network, in interdisciplinary and international teams. So, what are the practical challenges of international partnerships? The first one, for me, and I think it's for most of you, are language barriers. So research across national borders is English driven, and this can be an issue for non-native speakers. Another challenge is project funding are time limited, and that can compromise sustainability of research. Researchers must, though, find alternative ways to keep networking. It is also challenging the dynamic between the local contexts and cross-national research projects that regards transferability issues. How can the results of a research be applicable, make sense for different contexts? And another challenge with good impact are digital environments. They can help us all, they can help us with all these challenges as they allow to build virtual communities of research or virtual communities of practice or research and practice. Through digital environments, we can co-investigate and through these digital environments, we can increase cost effectiveness of our research. For example, reducing travel costs, making collaborative tasks easier, and so on. So this is my experience. As I told you, I wait for your questions or comments and also feedback. You can use the last minutes of this webinar, or you can email me, but I want to say thank you for this opportunity and hope.
Thank you. Thank you, Susana. Well, let's go ahead with our second presentation from Dr. Peters, and then we'll make some time for questions at the end. I see that we have while Dr. Peters is getting the slides up, a really small group. I have been checking my email to see if we had anyone having trouble getting in, but I don't have anything, but I'll keep watching that.
Great. Thanks, Carly. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. It's great to be here today. And thanks, everybody, for taking part. I want to congratulate the NIDA mini grantees. Fantastic in your competitive research grants, and the work that you're doing across borders is terrific. So I know the intent of the grants are to develop larger scale projects. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing about the results of your projects too, as you are now becoming experts, if you haven't already, in international research collaboration. So I mentioned to Carly that we hope to host a webinar, hopefully, with each of you involved in describing the research projects, findings, and so forth, and also lessons learned in international research collaboration. So fantastic. Thanks again for joining us today, whatever time of day it is across the globe. I'm going to present a little bit of information from some experiences that I've had, two of them courtesy of the Fulbright grant program that's hosted here in the United States, but features international collaborations. And then also some experiences from the USF, University of South Florida Nexus Initiative Grant Program, which was designed to do exactly what our mini grant programs are for, which is to host international research collaborations. And they are also small grants. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. I want to thank Dr. Henriques for her very enlightening comments about the challenges, barriers, obstacles, and also ways to overcome those in conducting international research. And I would echo her comments that with the digital platforms that we have, Zoom and capability for video conferencing, et cetera, that we have enormous potential for expanding our international research collaborations, as well as mentorship of students, faculty, et cetera, those kinds of things, sharing lectures and so forth. And I think ICU DDR, which each of you are members, is an important conduit for expanding those opportunities in the future. So without any further time, I want to move forward on the presentation. And so we'll go to the next slide. I just wanted to mention I'll move through some of these slides pretty quickly, if you don't mind, because I want to save some time for questions at the end. I do have a very short video to share with you at the end of this presentation as well from one of my colleagues in Paraguay. So briefly, the Fulbright Scholar Program is one of many Fulbright programs established in the United States to help and foster international collaborations of different types. And I want to mention that there are opportunities here not only for faculty members in the United States and in other countries, but also for students in the United States and in other countries to become Fulbright scholars and Fulbright grantees. So this might be something for you to look into if you haven't already. Just some information here about the program itself, but it's been around for quite a while, since 1946. And of course, Senator Fulbright from the United States was the original sponsor of this program and developed it. So a little bit about what the opportunities were for me as a Fulbright specialist grantee. Again, these are competitive grants, but they funded the following types of activities potentially. And of course, the application had to describe how you're going to carry out these activities. So a range of things. I think the research topic is under the first bullet, really, in terms of conducting needs assessment and evaluations. And we'll talk more about that. Also, the seminars, workshops, and conferences are can be heavily focused on research. And that was the case in both of my Fulbright grants that I'll be describing today. So just some of the activities covered in the grant program. So my first project, I was very fortunate to be able to take part in two grant projects, one in Ghana in West Africa and the other in Paraguay in South America. The first project was in collaboration with the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. and with the College of Health and Allied Sciences, Department of Mental Health. And my collaborator, Dr. Nanoni from UCC in Ghana. Here's just a location in West Africa of Ghana, and surrounded really by some lower income countries with all types of challenges for research and behavioral health services. So what about the activities for this particular international research collaboration? So we spent quite a bit of time in preparing for the research collaboration. And of course, in this type of grant, as is the case for your mini grants with NIDA, I'm sure you spent many meetings, video calls in preparation for what you were going to focus on in terms of your research project and then how you're going to carry that out. So one of the things that we decided we want to focus on is what about the problems of substance use disorders in mental hospitals and in prisons. And we ended up really focusing more on psychiatric hospitals in Ghana. There had been very little research in most of Africa on rates of substance use disorders in other non-traditional, in non-substance abuse behavioral health settings, such as forensic hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, other types of mental health settings. And certainly in Ghana, we didn't have any information about what the prevalence rates of substance use disorders were in these hospitals. We thought there was a large opportunity to identify the need for additional services in psychiatric hospitals if we could document the rates of prevalence rates of substance use disorders. So our goal was to conduct a needs assessment survey, really a research on prevalence rates of substance use disorders in Ghana's 3 psychiatric hospitals. We wanted to train the mental health staff at those hospitals in substance use and co-occurring disorders through various means, and also to train them in the research protocols to gather data for our study. And then, of course, we had some research lectures and workshops at the University of Cape Coast and at the psychiatric hospitals to make those more accessible to the staff who were working there so they didn't have to travel the 3 hours to the university campus. So talking about challenges that Susana talked about earlier, as many of you know, and perhaps is the case in the countries that you come from, the facilities are not always accessible and amenable to research in the way that we would like them to be. So just a couple snapshots of the main hospital in Accra, which is a city of approximately 12 million people, the largest city in Ghana, and one of the largest psychiatric hospitals located right in downtown Accra. So you can see just that this is a facility that was probably built in the early 1950s or even the 1940s and hasn't been significantly remodeled or retrofitted since then. We'll go on to some of the research questions that we wanted to pose, and these are fairly straightforward. What are the rates of substance use disorders in the psychiatric hospitals in Ghana? What are the most common substances that people abuse who are in those hospitals, so that we could perhaps begin to fashion and design treatment approaches for that population that needs substance abuse services as well as psychiatric services. And then lastly, what services, if any, are now provided to patients in those psychiatric hospitals who have drug use disorders? So with that in mind, we began to conducting the research study, and I just wanted to share a little bit of the detail with you and some of the challenges as well. So our first step was to develop an instrument by which we could survey the prevalence rates in the psychiatric hospitals. We met with the staff to look at what they are currently using to gather data, right, in their screening process. And it turned out there were no substance use instruments being administered. They were all involving psychiatric symptoms, diagnostic diagnostic conditions of individuals in the hospitals, as well as other psychosocial information. So what we did is to modify an evidence-based screening instrument that's been used throughout the United States and in other countries as well. We use the Texas Christian University Drug Screen 5, which is an evidence-based instrument that's actually based on the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria that's used in the United States and in other countries, along with ICD. And then we also developed a protocol to gather patient background information that would look at, for example, demographic information about the patients, any prior treatment history, and so forth. And of course, we went to the IRB, Institutional Review Board, at the University of Cape Coast to actually conduct this study to gather some of this sensitive information, which was all encrypted, of course, and protected from for confidentiality purposes. Anyway, so these are some of the first steps that we had to do to conduct the study. We had to train the staff in use of the instrument. And fortunately, my colleague at the University of Cape Coast had some connections at the hospitals already. And we had kind of some champions within the hospital setting who knew about the purpose of the research and who we engaged as partners in the process. And so I think that's an important step as well. You have to have buy-in. A lot of the research that goes on in these non-traditional settings require extra work from the staff. And so there's no apparent payoff unless you can create partnerships and opportunities for them to take part in research, examining outcomes of the population that they're working with. So some value added to the work that they're doing, because we can't clearly bring a lot of extra money and resources to pay for the staff time involved. And I think Dr. Henriques was talking about that earlier today in our webinar. So anyway, the study involved sampling 300 psychiatric patients, about a little over 1/3 of the entire hospital population in Ghana. We sampled from all 3 different hospitals, both male and female patients, and randomly selected patients from each psychiatric ward within each of the hospitals. And of course, informed consent was administered to all of the psychiatric patients prior to gathering data on the screening. So some of the challenges, and Dr. Henriques has mentioned some of these already. A lot of the patients didn't speak English as their primary language. And in many countries, in my experience, you have people who are coming particularly from rural settings who have not perhaps completed either primary or secondary school, who have not mastered one of the languages that we would use in our research studies. And in the case of Ghana, as with other countries, the alternative was speaking in dialects. And I think in Ghana, there are 5 primary dialects. And so that was one challenge. So we actually had to have translators who were available, who could sit in and conduct those interviews with the patients that didn't speak English. A lot of the staff were unaware of the patient's substance abuse history, or were in denial about the fact that substance abuse was a problem, right? And so there was an issue of kind of motivation for the staff to be involved and gather the data and be involved in the research. As you saw from the slide earlier, the psychiatric hospital wards, as in many other settings, was not conducive to research, and particularly about privacy in conducting screenings and interviews. And so this is a common problem in prisons that I work with, or jails. I work in criminal justice settings a lot. And so we're taking our research into settings that aren't used to working with researchers and aren't designed architecturally for research. And so we have to provide some workarounds and some other alternatives to address that. And in the end, we have to recognize that the conditions that we conduct research in are not perfect. So the final challenge I just wanted to mention was explaining the informed consent to patients, what that meant. So as you might imagine, most of these, if not all of the patients, had not been involved in any type of research before, and there hadn't been a lot of previous research conducted in the psychiatric hospitals. And so we had to explain kind of what the meaning of research was, how the data was going to be used. It wouldn't be used against them, either in a criminal justice setting or in providing more invasive treatments within the psychiatric hospital setting itself. I hope that makes sense. So just some other challenges. Power outages were really common in Ghana, limited internet bandwidth, and so the Wi-Fi wasn't very strong. So pulling down research articles or charts or previous protocols, instruments from my home base in the United States was not easy. There were several days where we just couldn't conduct any work on the internet or on the computer, at least on the internet with the power outages. Some other issues related to transportation. And I think, as Susana mentioned earlier, we all face the issue of lack of resources in our international research collaborations. And so in Ghana, for example, there's very limited research for an individual faculty member to conduct a study. And so it's very difficult to do a randomized control study involving multiple patients, multiple individuals in a study. And so where does the money come from? So that's a big challenge. But part of the issue is that there are few domestic grant programs in many of these countries. And there may be a lot of researchers who are competing for a small pool of grant funds in that country. In Ghana, there really weren't a lot of research grant programs that we could draw on. So we were reliant on just using our own human resources between our faculty members. When I was on site in Ghana, my collaborator, Dr. Nanoni, and the staff and contacts that he had at the psychiatric hospitals. I won't go into a lot of detail about the findings, but we found over 50% of the psychiatric patients had a bona fide diagnosable substance use disorder, with the primary problem drugs being alcohol and marijuana. There were much higher rates of substance use disorders among the male patients. We also found, as I mentioned before, there was a lack of any standardized screening instruments for substance use disorders in the psychiatric hospitals. And so this is a huge, not only do we identify the need for services in those settings, but also a need for additional protocols to gather data and perhaps even justify the need for additional funding to support drug treatment services in the psychiatric hospitals in Ghana. And finally, we also, in this population, we were obviously looking at co-occurring mental and substance use disorders, and there weren't any specific services for either drug treatment or for specialized services for those that had both mental and substance use disorders. So that's just some of the challenges, the findings from the first Fulbright sponsored project. I'll move pretty quickly on the second project. I was very fortunate to get a second grant from the Fulbright Foundation for a Fulbright Specialist project in Asunción, Paraguay, with my colleagues from Universidad Catolica. Key collaborator was Dr. Diana Lesme, chair of the Department of Psychology there. Also, Cecilia Munoz and Graciela Barreto from the Department of Psychology, and all of them well connected with the justice system and with the behavioral health systems in Paraguay. Some of the key research activities on this first trip to Paraguay, funded by the Fulbright project, some of the following: just research presentations, consultation and training with the National Center for Addictions in Paraguay, focused on how to improve evidence-based practices for those who are involved in residential substance abuse treatment. And then other consultation, looking at developing program evaluation and needs assessment. And then finally, looking at potential for other collaborative research projects, for example, those involving substance use in the justice system in Paraguay, which was a project that we had begun to talk about, and I'll mention that in a few minutes related to this final grant project. So some of the challenges faced. I got a call about 2 weeks before my scheduled trip to Asuncion, Paraguay, from Dr. Lesme in Asuncion. And she said, can we postpone your trip? Because the university is now on strike. Students have occupied, and some faculty members have occupied the main administration building in Asuncion. Here is the Universidad Catolica main administration building at the time that I arrived. And you can see there are fences or barriers put up at the front entrance, as well as people milling around. And you can see actually the students inside and a few faculty members inside who are occupying the building. So that was a major problem. One of the issues was the psychology department was located in that building. So we could not have any meetings. The offices for my collaborators were being occupied, and they did not have access to their own files, their computers, etc. Another issue that we face in international research is the need for translation. And for those of you who are involved in the ICU DDR or with other international partners, I'm sure you come across the same issue. And so we had to provide translation during meetings, workshops, research presentations. I'll just tell you one quick anecdote. On one of I mentioned that I was doing some work to help promote evidence-based practices at the National Center for Addictions Treatment in Asuncion. And during one of the presentations of their staff on different evidence-based programs for substance use treatment, I had a translator who hadn't done this very much before. And he was supposed to translate my comments to the individuals in the room. And I would, go slowly so that he could translate. And sometimes I would stop and he wouldn't translate. And then other times he would speak directly to me as if I needed the translation in Spanish, which I didn't need. And I had to redirect him to the audience, and that was a constant problem. So we actually had to replace him so that there wasn't the same issue in later meetings, and that worked out fine. We ended up with a translator who was able to serve in a number of the other meetings. We also had some challenges in establishing student and faculty exchange programs following the visit. I went back to the University of South Florida. One of the issues was in student exchange programs, I didn't know this, but USF, where I work, University of South Florida, requires that the exchange university, in this case, Universidad Catolica in Paraguay, that they have as many students coming to USF in Tampa as we send to Paraguay. And so they told me that there probably wasn't going to be any market demand for students going to Paraguay to study. And so that was a major challenge as far as the student exchange. The faculty exchange, one of the big issues is just funding. How do you fund that from individual departments at the universities to do that? So I mentioned the strike as one of the major challenges. So one of the fun things that we ended up from that Fulbright project was that we actually successfully competed for a small grant program at the University of South Florida to continue our work and to conduct a research study, which was great. We had talked about the need for conducting some research in the criminal justice system in Paraguay. And here's what we ended up with is a small grant from the University of South Florida focused on just the same topic, international collaboration on research. And so this was a small grant program that funded primarily travel for two of my collaborators from Universidad Catolica in Paraguay to come to the United States. And I'll share with you a video in just a few minutes about that. So we visited jails, prisons, looking at specifically at drug treatment programs in those settings. We visited drug courts, including a family dependency treatment court and an adult drug court in the United States. We hosted a research webinar here, as well as research colloquia on site for my colleagues and myself to present the findings from our research and our project. So that was the first step. I followed up, we had COVID that hit right after their visit. And So I had to postpone my visit to Paraguay. That was the second part of that grant. So that follow-up visit didn't happen until 2021. However, that was a very successful visit. And in our research in Paraguay, we ended up doing some similar things as we did during the Ghana Fulbright project. But in this case, we looked at prisons, looking at administering substance use screening instruments in prison for female inmates, recognizing that there were very few services being provided and that there was probably a big need among this population for substance abuse services. So we ended up using the United Nations World Health Organization screening instrument, the ASSIST, to administer to 250 female inmates in different prisons in Paraguay, with the same findings that we actually had in Ghana. Over half of the population had a substance use disorder. One of the results you'll see in the video also, we were able to obtain a signed agreement from the Ministry of Justice in Paraguay to establish universal screening for female prisoners. So that was a big accomplishment, we thought, in getting that first step accomplished, to actually identify people in the female prisons who needed substance use services. And we also identified the need for reform of correctional policies and procedures and for drug treatment services in the prisons in Paraguay, both for females and for males. I think that was my last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen. I'm going to go back to my second screen and share the video with you, which will be the end of the presentation. If you'll bear with me. So let's see, I want to exit this. Oops. I'm going to go and share my screen.
Hi, my name is Cecilia Munoz, and
Can you hear that? Is that coming through?
Yes.
Thank you.
along with Liana Lesme and Graciela Quevedo, I've had the wonderful opportunity to collaborate with Dr. Roger Peters and with the University of South Florida on an important topic like the risk level of substance use in incarcerated women. This was facilitated by Liana Lesme, who was at the time the director of the psychology department of Catholic University in Paraguay, where I am at the moment. And she and Roger have known each other for years from the ICU DDR, and they have been in contact for many years, always seeking ways in which they could work together on topics that are pressing for both realities, that of Paraguay and that of the United States. This is an important issue when it comes to international collaboration, since finding a collaborator, it's more like an organic process, and the timing needs to be right for an opportunity to arise so that these collaborators can work together and take the chance. International collaborations, and especially having the opportunity to travel and witness firsthand how the work is carried elsewhere, can provide insights and new ideas on how to approach an issue. And in the same time, you can learn from the mistakes made, as well as from best practices. So in this scenario, for this research, Graciela and myself were able to visit South Florida, where Dr. Peters arranged a number of visits to prisons, as well as other correctional institutions, sites where drug treatment programs or stabilization are provided or offered, family dependency treatment courts, among other places. On the other hand, when Roger came to Paraguay, who was also invited, of course, we had conversations with the head of the Ministry of Justice, the head of SENAG, that is the National Anti-Drug Secretariat, and we also visited many prisons. So the impact for this sort of exchange allows to have, like I said, a broader view of the issue and also a broader approach to what can be done and what is being done. And it's not, it has a great impact in the sense that, for example, here in Paraguay, the Senate director was very impressed with what we've done and was very impressed with the visit. And in that sense, is interested in training manuals and in developing manuals and workshops to train the in-prison workers for all prisons in Paraguay that have incarcerated women, since that was the main topic of our research. For this experience, what we've learned about international research collaboration is that science and advances in science are a global endeavor. Ideas transcend borders, so we can all benefit from collaborating. And furthermore, research by internationally mobile academics is more visible and it's more cited, so that's a plus. And the idea that we can all learn and create bonds to develop science, and not only that, but develop programs or ways in which we can treat very present issues in our societies today it's a must. It's not an option. I consider it to be an obligation, or we're all working into making this whole world a better place. So getting together with other researchers and other people that are working on the same topics as we are can definitely make improvements in what we know about the topic and what we can do about it. So thank you very much for your time. I hope this was useful for you, and carry on with the webinar.
Great. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much.
No, I was clapping, and I see some claps from our participants as well. We've got a small group, and I did check. It looks like you all should have the ability to unmute yourself. So please take advantage of the blessing of having a small group, which is you have an opportunity to ask questions of our speakers. And I'm just watching the chat as well for anybody who might need to use that. Roger, can I ask a question while folks are gearing up to ask theirs? So this example from Paraguay was amazing, because what I heard was that you went to Paraguay and they came to Florida, right? And so we have this idea that whenever we're crossing cultures, right, that we each have things to learn. And so was that a feature of the grant that you wrote? How were you able to make that happen, that you could each come to each other's country and learn?
Right. So the original Fulbright grant requires that you travel to a host university in another country for faculty members in the United States. And so that's a part of it. The nice thing about that particular Fulbright was that it was a 3 to 4 week time span. There's also a Fulbright program where you can spend an entire semester or an entire year at another university to conduct research. But this one, because of my ongoing projects, it made sense just to have a shorter project, and it involved travel necessarily as part of the project to the other country. The second grant program that we obtained from the University of South Florida was basically enough money to pay for travel for my colleagues to come here, which was a really nice component, because as Cecilia, Dr. Munoz mentioned in the video, it's really hard to imagine and to really understand something unless you're right there in person, particularly if you're seeing, let's say, a drug treatment program within a prison. It's very difficult. You can't really do videos because of confidentiality, and it's important to see the entire facility. I mean, one thing that I noticed, one thing that's very important when I do site visits is to be on site, to see kind of the architectural layout, the facility itself, and see what obstacles, as Susana mentioned, might pertain to conducting research in that setting. And so one of the things I noticed when I was there in Paraguay on my second visit, when we visited the prisons, was there was no staff available to actually conduct the screening. So they really needed additional staff to do that. They had one psychologist for, I think, about 500 or 600 females in the prison we visited that was about 2 hours away from Asuncion. And so that was one of the logistical things that had to be considered. I probably wouldn't have known that unless I was on site.
You sort of used 2 grants to kind of make that connection happen. So
yeah, the first grant allowed us to think about research projects that we might continue on. The second grant actually allowed us to conduct the research examining prevalence of drug use disorders among the female inmates.
excellent. I do see one question, which is for Dr. Peters. When are you coming back to Paraguay? This is from Dr. Acosta.
Would love to. I had such a great experience. The people were very welcoming. There was a lot of opportunity for change and motivation for enhancing, promoting better services, improved services in Paraguay. So, and the colleagues there are wonderful in each of the ministries, including SENAD, the Ministry of Justice, the National Addiction Center, all of the psychiatrists, psychologists, justice officials I work with, judges. So I look forward to that. I've actually talked with Dr. Lesme about the possibility of returning, but we don't have concrete plans at this point. But you know, I think as Dr. Henriques mentioned before, that these kind of experiences, as your mini grants, provide an opportunity for follow-up visits and collaboration. And so part of it's just building relationships, right? So that can happen. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Matthew Tiso, and I'm in Nairobi, Kenya. And thanks for the 2 brilliant presentations, Suzanne and Peters. My question is regarding Peter, the grant facility. Is it open for organizations besides university institutions and all that, organizations that either work with prisons, for example, or mental health organizations? I work for a coalition of mental health organizations in the country. Is there an opportunity for us to maybe to apply for such grants? Thank you so much.
Yeah. So good, really good question. And that's one of the challenges, is finding the right grant program to do that. So for the Fulbright program, Matthew, the intent is for collaboration between institutions in primarily university institutions. And so, but it doesn't rule out collaboration between a host university in Nairobi, for example. It could be Kenyatta University, one of the others, who actually we've done a lot of work with. They could involve you as a partner in the Fulbright grant, but the university in Nairobi or in Kenya would have to have a person who would be your partner to apply with a university colleague in the United States to conduct that project. There are separate programs, though, that including the Fogarty International Grant Program in the United States, that offer international research collaborations with other institutions like your own. And I'm not sure if what organization you're working with, but I think there are other programs like, and I can identify those and send those to you if that would be helpful. I'm going to be in Kenya in a couple of weeks, coming back there, and I think I'm going to be back in Nigeria for another follow-up meeting. We have, of course, with ICU-DDR, we have significant partners in Kenya, as well as with the U.S. Department of State, INL division. We are doing a lot of work in Kenya. There was recently a training, I don't know if you were involved in the Alternatives to Incarceration training that was hosted by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. That was, I think it took place in Mombasa about, I'm going to say 3 to 4 months ago. and there's follow-up activities going on right now. But I will look and identify some grants programs that may be useful for you, and I'd be happy to collaborate with you on those in the future if you'd like.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Let me share my email. in the chat.
Please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And karibu tena Nairobi.
Very good. Asante-san.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Well, we are coming up on the end of our time, so I want to thank both of our presenters, Dr. Henriques and Dr. Peters. And Dr. Peters, please, also so grateful to your colleague who joined us by video. That was an unexpected treat. For everyone, we're kind of working on this question at ICU DDR about how we can better support international research, including things like research partnerships. And so I thanks to all of you who completed our survey on the topic of research barriers. Right now we're looking at the data, and we will share back what we learn with you. But I also invite you to share your thoughts, our presenters and our participants as well. And so I'm just going to put my email in the chat box so you have access to that. And I want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the important work that you have chosen. Be well.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.